however much we talk of democracies and democratic states, and we talk of illiberal democracies now in terms of how governments have been elected and what our governments are doing, you're looking at how populism and populist authoritarianism is taking hold. Today, we have democratically elected governments, and who is electing these governments, and on what basis and what ideological underpinnings actually promote that electoral process and that electoral thinking and that populace that elects, and how it now polarizes the question of sovereignty, of state security, the fear politics. I think we need to come to terms with that as well. It's not anymore a straightforward understanding of democracy, and we need to begin to put certain, maybe redefine democracy in terms of how we want it to be, and also redefine democracy in terms of the various configurations that today affect democratic practice. And then that brings me to the question of, okay, so we have these governments, and we have the state underpinning these governments, and we have our social contracts with our state, which is our constitutions, but our constitutions are completely undermined. So what normative frames are we working with? And Claire, you were talking about the normative frame of human rights. And that's completely violated, whether it's civil and political rights or whether it's social, cultural, and economic rights. And we still cling to those normative frames. And I do need a normative frame, but I think we are beyond, I don't think we can leverage that anymore. Because the nature of our states have changed. Many of our states are not secular anymore. The ideology that underpins our states are very often ethno-nationalist or religious. That is the ideology that underpins the state. And so what's the social contract we have, particularly as women, as feminists? How do you deal with this emerging authoritarianism that's buttressed by these kinds of ideologies? And this another factor, I think, that maybe is not so relevant in Latin America, but that's certainly present in West Asia, in Asia, in parts of Africa, in East Asia, is violent extremism, non-state engagement in violent extremism that's underpinned by Islamophobia, what's the other, xenophobia, and the emergence of that kind of extremist violence and how that affects women. And that's often completely the work of non-state entities that you don't have any control over. So that's another piece of what, how authoritarianism is working both at the level of state and non-state.
Now I have data from it with what you said about in Latin America, there is the weakening of trust from citizens to government. It's amazing, and how they feel that democracy is not delivering to them. And for me, we need to think and see what are the democratic aspirations of the people, which I think that the whole notion of democracy of many of the people on the street is not in agreement to our notion of liberal democracies. And you mentioned the corruption and outrage. And in the Dominican Republic, I would say that the women's movement and the movement around corruption in the recent years, it's the only thing that we have seen in the street to a minor or larger extent. And in this movement against corruption, all of their movement became together, and it seemed as hope. But I have told this story to others that within this movement, I heard people, when we were marching on the street, feeling so joyful about the fact that we were so many on the street, which is very, very rare in the Dominican Republic, and saying, so after we are done with corruption, migration and Haitians are next. So, and the Haitian problem, as people call it, the people from Haiti, yeah.
Haiti.
Yes. Los Haitians, yes. So these are not the people that I want to mobilize with. And this touches what you were saying yesterday, Sonia, as well, about articulation. In a way, we feel that we have no choice because we have no leverage if we don't have a lot of people on the street. But a lot of people that we have do not share the same values, the same feminist values that we share. I mean, obviously, I do not have the answer. But from this discussion overall, what I take is that if democracy is young, it's fragile, but a real democracy is based on the assumption of political equality, which we don't have. So I think that our role in our analysis of challenging why we don't have it, and we have been doing that for so long, and we are already discussing that with the role of capitalism and neoliberalism, of intelligence capitalism, and everything that comes after. It's what we have in front of us right now, making it much more complex. But the thing is that the whole discussion on democracy needs to be much more complex in any case, because it's failing so many people, and in questioning ourselves why so many people do not believe in the state or use it to put in front of us anti-democratic governments and leaders. We need to find a way around it.
Well, I think first, see, the question of democracy and it's the way in which it works is diverse in different parts of the world, in different states, in different moments of history, in different times. And its fragility is also different in different places and in different times. So what's true for certain parts of Latin America possibly is not true to certain parts of Asia and to certain parts of Africa. Yeah. But I think the question I was asking is, and I think Anusya was saying this, what is the frame we want to work with? Do we need to re-look at this? That's the question I'm asking, right? And with that, and for me, the normative frameworks are very important. We lived through conflict for 30 years. We're probably looking at conflict for another 30 years. The normative frame was absolutely sacred for us, particularly the universal norms, right? Norms of human rights. And the Constitution. Our Constitution was also sacred. But I know now that with the coming parliamentary election in my country, this new dispensation will get more than 2/3 of a majority and will change the Constitution. So what then is the Constitution that I must abide by?
Yeah.
Because this is a Constitution that will be set in stone,
Yeah.
that a popular majority has voted in a 2/3 government with a 2/3 majority, and that they will, and this is majoritarian politics at work, populist majoritarian politics. So it's, for me, it's maybe an identification, I don't know what, to say this is a danger that you need to look out for in many parts of the world. I know the welfare state. We've had a welfare state. I know the importance of the state. But today the state, I mean, the way in which the state can change and what it can do, and the fact that it will not respect the social contract it has with us, is something that I'm just putting on the table. These are some of the concerns that we need to be aware of, and we can't take for granted. We did, despite war, despite conflict, we took these normative frames and standards and institutions for granted. And I can tell you that in a month, the whole thing has changed. So that's all I'm putting on the table.
I've never been anti-state. And I certainly wasn't, suggesting that we be so critical of the democratic state or democracy. We recognise it is the best form we have. I mean, Churchill's statement, but nor about constitutions. I mean, I put a lot of faith in constitutions. We may not get the one we want, and it may be eroded and whatever. But I have still always thought that better what you have than to see it eroded. But your point, Fatu, about opening up. debates and whatever like this is very dangerous because, yes, it can be completely corrupted and, further weakened. So just that. And similarly with the UN system. I'm critical of it, but of course it's all we have in terms of the multilateral space and institutions through which we can work. Because, of course, we don't want to work with the IFIs or the WTO and so forth.
We can talk about many different challenges, but I think one of the challenges is that I just call an achievement is very fragile. Mm-hmm. And I also think that because the practice of feminism, it's so plural, and we understood that it's not only about, gender equality, it's also about economic equality or economic justice, and it's about ecological justice. We have this great burden and weight on our shoulders that we need to get into many other issues, many other social movements. We need to articulate our demands, our values, our beliefs with other allies, other people that we might not be so aligned. So on the one hand, we have like the usual monsters that have always been there trying to keep the world as it was. And that is like a major challenge. But on the other hand, to try to articulate our belief, our values, our demands, and create wider alliances, and sometimes among ourselves. Because as feminism gets more plural, it's sometimes more difficult to, agree on priorities, on strategies, on everything. So I think that's a major challenge.